Speak loudly.
I'm very grateful to the respected HOD of this department and Professor Berke, who gave me this permission to participate in this seminar. And I'm very thankful to all those who organized this seminar, and very happy that Professor Ahmad is present here. I'm going to talk about individualism in Islam, theory and practice in the context of political philosophy. I will touch upon several issues, but our concentration would be mainly on women's individuality in Islam. Well, in the ancient and medieval periods, the concept of liberty in its present form was missing. Greek thinkers such as Socrates and Plato refused to accept the notion of individual freedom against society or state. Socrates refused to run away from prison and readily drank the hemlock because he believed that freedom lies in the obedience to the laws of the state or society. In Islam too, human being cannot enjoy its individuality. Of course, an individuality which is perceived by modern Western philosophy. Rather, individuality has become a prisoner of faith in Allah or God. Since its inception, Islam did not go necessary reforms to promote the individuality of human beings. However, that does not mean that Islam does not favor individualism. Therefore, if the teachings given by Quran would be interpreted or considered within the context of political philosophy, one may not find enough room for the philosophy of individualism. In fact, much of Islamic law has been derived from Quran, the holy book for Muslims. Quran is the primary source of identity, authority, and law for Islam. Quran calls for human beings or Muslims to acknowledge God's sovereignty over their lives and invite them to submit to His will. We all know that in Islam, Islam in the Arabic language means submission to the will of God. And follower of Islam, known as Muslim, means those who surrender themselves to the will of Allah. That is to say that you have to, the moment you enter into Islam, you have to surrender yourself to all those rules and regulations which have been prescribed by Islam or Quran. In this regard, many Muslim scholars believe that people in general, sovereignty does not rest with people in general. And sovereignty does not belong to a monarch or a class of people. Rather, sovereignty belongs to Allah or God, who is the sovereign, ultimate sovereign. In this regard, there is a famous scholar, if I'm not mistaken, his name is Dr. Kim Ormes, remarks that the individual exists not as a separate being endowed by God or natural law with certain rights, but as a person who has certain obligations to Allah. In the Western experience, the rights and obligations of the individual toward God and the state were worked out through not only different and separate developments of canon and civil law, but also through the emergence of the idea of individual conscience. In other words, he says, in the Western tradition, the idea emerged that the best and probably only authentic way that God could be worshipped was that it was not cursed by the state in any way. You have to have freedom of conscience. This idea developed in both the Protestant and Catholic Reformations and also certainly in the Enlightenment. But it is not an idea that, at least in this particular form, has great prominence in the Muslim world. He says that, I am not saying it does not exist, but I am saying that, as I have described it, it is not a common feature of legal, constitutional, and political practice. The risk of free will, he says, of course, is that you will choose wrong. In Surah Baqarah, Quran gives this liberty to the people that there is no compulsion in religion. But somewhere else in Surah Imran, Quran threatens the non-believers for not following what Allah says. For example, we will here refer to one Quranic verse. Allah says in Quran, let not the unbelievers think that our respite to them is good for themselves. We grant them respite that they may grow in their iniquity, but they will have a shameful punishment. Or in another verse, Surah Nisa, verse 14, Quran clearly says, but those who disobey Allah and His Messenger and transgress His limits will be admitted to a fire, to abide therein, and they shall have a humiliating punishment. You know, in fact, these two verses give us two contradictory explanations. First, the verse says that you are allowed, you are free to choose Islam or don't choose Islam. The second one tells us that whatsoever you are not free, you have to face that consequences. Based on such and such Quranic edicts, you know, in a number of Islamic states like Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, if a Muslim converts himself from Islam into any other religion and leave Islam, his punishment is death sentence. Second, the liberal theory of free speech has, you know, important value because it can be seen as a guard against absolutism. However, a completely unrestricted freedom may lead to the infringement on the belief or liberty of others. The nature and extent of these, you know, restraints, you know, can be imposed or enforced. You know, whatsoever they constitute major problems for the state and society. You know, historically, these problems are revolved around the expression of ideas which have been antagonistic to the prevailing political and social or religious beliefs or institution. In Islam, we do have freedom, but limits must not be crossed. People do not have freedom to question, criticize, negate, or deny Islam, let alone Muslims. Whatever people have freedom is within the sphere of Islam. In this respect, Quran in Surah Hajj says, those who strive